Welcome to the DynamicText Instructional Videos for Teachers series. The goal of this video is to introduce you to the concept of talk and text instructional routines and to the use of text-dependent question stems as a multidimensional tool for facilitating close reading, developing explicit word knowledge, and familiarizing our students with the specialized and formal language of the questions in their assessments. The catalyst for the development of these materials was the challenge we observed our students face with textbook reading and high-stakes testing. The characteristics of these tasks include long passages requiring far greater stamina and effort than our typical classroom reading, complex academic language and text structure, and decidedly unfamiliar content, particularly in the case of reading assessments. In the attempt to create a pure reading test and to minimize the advantage of possible prior knowledge, test-creating companies deliberately select content that students will not have had prior exposure to. There are two options for this kind of text selection: to use contemporary literary and informational works and pay copyright fees, or to select passages from public domain works. This varies nationally, but in the United States, works enter the public domain when the copyright expires, 50 to 70 years after initial publication, which means that these texts are pretty old. Both word meaning and language structure undergo significant changes over time, so these archaic reading selections present additional challenges of text structure and multiple meaning words. In terms of preparing our students, we have some fairly clear directives: to address the language demand of text, to take every opportunity to provide explicit word knowledge, and to familiarize our students with the specialized formal language of the question stems used in assessments. To do this, we need to embed high-stakes test-taking strategies into our ongoing curriculum. We can't afford to take time away from our scope and sequence with decontextualized test preparation materials. And as teachers, there are a couple of important awarenesses to become really conscious of. In terms of content mastery, what do our students really need to memorize in terms of content and concepts to be successful on our own formative and summative exams? It's my observation that most of the tests students take require massive amounts of memorization. Certainly the Common Core and eventual PARCC exams will be moving us away from this trend and toward assessing students' abilities to apply concepts rather than spit back learned information. We can follow the trend of the Common Core by implementing text-dependent questioning in our own classroom tests. And we need to become more metacognitive about the complexity of test questions. For example, the simple question, "What is the importance of the setting in this passage?" requires three distinct layers of thought. What are the elements of setting, which are significant, and how do those impact the reader? When we really understand the intention of the question, the multiple choice options become much easier to decipher. The text-dependent question stem cards are a set of laminated, ring-bound cards that include question stems gleaned from the nationally published high-stakes testing: the Florida FCAT, the Massachusetts MCAS, the Maine MES, and the Arizona AIMS, etc., with the Common Core state standards color-coded by content area so that teachers in English language arts or history or science can identify how the questions are framed in the different disciplines and how the question stem routines can be implemented across the content areas. For example, a cause and effect question in reading might be presented as an experimental model and outcome question in science. The four assessment areas of the question stem cards are reading application, informational text and research process, vocabulary, and literary analysis. So let's take a look at some complex text and see how these can be used. This is a seminal historical document, Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, and right away we can see that this is a pretty complex text. And we can't successfully introduce text-based questions without first making sure that this text is understood. We have to address the language demand. With 16 unfamiliar words and repetitions in the text, we have less than 90% coverage, which puts even our skilled readers at frustration level. Fortunately, we can use the question stems as a tool to simultaneously familiarize students with the vocabulary-based questions and the complex language of this text. Why is this vocabulary development so important? You can't comprehend text if you don't know the words, and we need explicit word knowledge 95% of the time to get the meaning of a text. We love the idea of context clues, but all research indicates that we're successful using context for about 1 in 20 words, about 5% of the time. If we use the vocabulary question stems to introduce our text, we're giving our students another meaningful interaction with academic vocabulary, and William Nagy reminds us that it takes 14 interactions to move a word along the word recognition scale from "I've seen that word" to "I can use that word." The most important scaffold for complex text is a gloss list or other vocabulary resource. We use gloss lists specifically created for the text. A gloss provides a one-word meaning of the target word in the same part of speech, and only the meaning of the word as it is used in the text. We need to explicitly model the use of question stems to form questions. Remember, the specialized language of assessments is not familiar to our students. We need to teach them what it means and how to create their own questions using that formal language. And we need to clearly identify where in the text the answers can be found. Many of our students don't believe the answers are in the text, and we need to demonstrate that the text is the source of information. These are called talk and text routines for a reason. We are hardwired to acquire language in conversation and functional use, so we need to provide structured interactions that scaffold the use of academic language with peers. In order for students to practice, we're going to provide them with lots of context: the question stems, the gloss list or other vocabulary resource, the text, and a partner. After extensive whole group modeling, we will ask them to create questions with the words we have assigned, 1 per student, 2 per student pair, and to create 3 multiple choice answers using the gloss list or other vocabulary resource. And when they're done, this is a quick process, we will scatter the whiteboards randomly around the room and have students circulate to answer each other's questions. A lot happens in this simple routine. Students get a preview of the text through the use of the question stems and gloss list that greatly increases text comprehension. They gain exposure and practice with the specialized language of high-stakes test questions. They get multiple repetitions of the target vocabulary as they refer to the gloss lists to determine the correct answer to their peers' questions. This entire process can take as little as 15 minutes as a preview to text reading, and a during reading check or post-reading review can be accomplished with question stems from reading application, literary analysis, or informational text and research as your text selection indicates. As you become more familiar with text-dependent questioning, you may want to extend practice into academic writing as well, and I invite you to preview the scaffolding of academic writing, developing independent writers through structured discussion and oral rehearsal.